Hey guys, welcome! And today I'm going to be talking about something I've been meaning to do for years. Constantly when I'm at work or hanging out with friends, I'll be talking about D&D and how much I absolutely love it. And the thing is, most of the time people are like, well, I've never played D&D. How's it work? What is it? I mean, I've heard of D&D, but what is D&D, right? So basic gist is, D&D stands for Dungeons and Dragons. And of course you're like, oh, it's that game, right? Dungeons and Dragons. But what is Dungeons and Dragons? Or maybe you've heard a couple of rumors about what Dungeons and Dragons might be, and you're like, well, I don't want to play Satan's game. But in actuality, Dungeons and Dragons has nothing to do with the occult or Satanism. Well, not exactly. Let me explain. So many years ago, back in the 70s or 60s, I'm not quite sure. I think it was the 70s. But a group of people, basically, D&D had just came out. And there was nothing like it. Video games did not exist, right? And so when they saw this game with wizards and fighters and stuff like that, they thought, well, this must be Satan. With actual spells, real working spells and stuff like that. And the truth is, D&D is nothing like that at all. If you've seen a Lord of the Rings movie, then you've seen what it's like to play D&D, essentially. Because Dungeons and Dragons is actually based off the works of Tolkien. Now, it's not the same thing, but the people who made Dungeons and Dragons were inspired by fantasy stories such as Lord of the Rings and whatnot, Conan the Barbarian. They were inspired by these things, and so they made a game where you could play as those characters, right? And you can play as heroes and whatnot, and the spells and stuff inside the game are not magical spells where you say out random words that could mean stuff, right? No, it's I cast magic missile, I cast fireball, I cast hold person, stuff like that. And you don't say random incantations, But where the game could go into those things and whatnot is that this game is entirely played based off of your imagination. You make up the things that you see and play inside the game when you're playing it. So ultimately, the game is only as evil or dark as the person that is playing it. Ultimately, so that's how the game is. It's a game played in the imagination. Now, Dungeons and Dragons, it's got two types of players that play the game. Okay, you have the Dungeon Master, and then you have the player character. Okay, and so when you're playing Dungeons and Dragons, the Dungeon Master is essentially like a game console. It's the game. It tells you what you see. It controls all the people. It is not the player character, and it sets up the story and the encounters. So essentially, the Dungeon Master is like the cartridge for Zelda Ocarina of Time, right? And then you got the players. And that's essentially Link, the person who controls Link. That's the player character, right? Well, everything that is not Link is the DM, essentially. Anyway, so if you want to play Dungeons and Dragons, there are a couple of things you need to know about Dungeons and Dragons. By the way, this art right here is actually from Dungeons and Dragons books, from Advanced Dungeons and Dragons. I actually have the books that hold these drawings, because you would think, oh, that's a terrible drawing. That's because an artist did not draw this. It was a game designer, I think. But anyway, so a couple of things you need in order to play Dungeons and Dragons. First off, you need dice, okay? And so we got on here, on this screen, we got several types of dice, okay? You're going to need them all in order to play. Okay? You can go to your local game exchange or Books a Million. Uh, any sort of store like that will most likely sell you dice for playing. Even Walmart has them, so you can buy them at Walmart. But you're going to want one of each of these, and they normally come in a set when you buy the dice. So you can probably buy a full set of this at Walmart or Books a Million, so on and so forth. But I'm going to go ahead and explain what each of these dice are, just so you know, okay? So we're going to start from the smallest all the way up to the biggest. So you got that triangle one right there. That one is a D4, all right? And that means each dice rolls between 1 and whatever the number is. In this case, 1 and 4, okay? The D6 is the one you've probably already seen before. Rolls between 1 and 6. Then you got, the D6, by the way, is the square one. Then you got a D8, okay? D8 looks like a diamond shape. It's the one right at the very top next to the triangle. That one is a D8, rolls between 1 and 8. Then you got a D10. Those are the two on the left right there. Those are both technically D10s, right? You got the it says right there on there 20 and 80 and 60. And then the one underneath it, it's a 1, 4, 6. Anyway, those are both technically D10s, and they roll between 1 and 10. But what the one above it, the one that looks weird, that's technically a D10. What that's for is so you can roll between 1 and 100. So you roll that one and a normal D10. So let's say you roll and it lands on what it is now, the 80, right? And then you roll the D10 and it rolls on what it is now, which is a 6, right? That means you roll an 86. Anyway, so you got the D4, D6, D8, 2 D10s, and you got the one at the bottom, which is actually a D12, rolls between 1 and 12. Now the one you're going to be using the most is actually the one in the middle, the D20. Okay, you're going to be using the D20 for just about everything. You're going to be rolling to see if you attack. You're going to be rolling to do a stealth roll, check for items, check for traps, anything, hide. Most actions require you to roll the D20 to see if it's success or failure. And the other dice are to determine how successful you are, essentially. So, like, let's say you roll to hit somebody, right? You hit somebody with your sword, which most of the time is a D8. So you roll the D8 to see how much damage. That's how the dice work in this game. Anyway, so Dungeons and Dragons, it's not just chance and whatnot either, but I'll explain that in a minute. You got the character sheet right here, all right? So I'm gonna I can kind of zoom in, so you can kind of see it. All right. So this is your character sheet, and on the character sheet, at the very top, can't really read it, but I'm just gonna say it. You'll put your name, your race, your class, your level, your experience points. All that stuff goes at the top, right? And then next you have these squares on the left. These squares with the circle. Let's see if I can zoom into them. These squares right here. Each one stands for your main stats, right? So you would take three of your D6, which is the square one, and then you roll them, right? And then you'd add those numbers together, and you put them in these squares right here, all right? And those are your strength. The second one's dexterity. Third one's constitution. Fourth one is intelligence. Fifth one's wisdom, and the sixth one is charisma. And so you roll it 6 times. You roll the 3d6, add them together, do that 6 times, put them into your stats, and then there's a table that will tell you what those stats roll into. But essentially, it's like 10 is 0, every even number. Like 10 is 0, 12 is 1, 14 is 2, 16 is 3. and you would put those pluses inside the little circle for each one, and then those would translate over to these skills, which is the squares. The squares with these little lines in it. Let's see if I can kind of zoom in a little bit more. Hold on. 1 second. Try to make this a little bigger. Right here. These right here. So there's like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18 little things that those stats go into. It's like acrobatics, athletics, animal handling, insight, persuasion, intimidation, all these other things, and they go into there and fills out those sheets. And essentially, whenever you want to do an action, it's like, hey, I want to look and see if there's any hidden levers. You do a perception roll. Hey, I'd like to see if I can barter for a lower price. Do a persuasion. Hey, I'd like to play a song at the bar. Well, do a performance, stuff like that. And each one is based off of your initial 6 stats. So it's like persuasion, performance, those are charisma, while athletics is strength, acrobatics is dexterity, so on and so forth. Anyway, let's scroll down a little. Okay. Then you got the ones above it, which are basically your proficiency bonuses. So you put like what's in the circles in each one: strength, dexterity, constitution, intelligence, wisdom, charisma. And then the ones that are these little circles next to them that are highlighted are your proficiencies. Yeah, it's a little complicated from there, but basically the things that you chose to be that your class is will have those highlighted. And then the things right here, you get to choose certain ones in the acrobatics and whatnot to get your proficiency bonus. Anyway, let's move over. Here, let's take it out. Boom. There we go. Now, on this part of the sheet, we got your health, your AC, your saving throws, your weapons, and all that other stuff, which will be determined by your character in your class and whatnot. So, like, let's say you're a wizard, you're going to have low health, you'll have, and how it's determined is, each class gets a hit die. It's what it's called. It's called a hit die, which is what your health is. At level 1, you get whatever the max amount of health is, plus your constitution bonus. So it's like if you're a wizard, I think it's a D6. It's at level 1, you have 6 plus your constitution bonus. And then at level 2, you would get half of that, or the average of that, plus your constitution, or you could roll your hit die, which, that means you could roll between 1 and whatever it is to add to your maximum health at level 2, so on and so forth. And that's how you gain health. Every time you level up, you gain health. Your armor class, on the other hand, is determined by your armor. So, like, if you're wearing plate or something like that, you'll get whatever your armor class is. And it's called AC for short. So, like, let's say you're wearing plate. That's 18 AC, right? Now, how AC works is, in this game, you roll your 20-sided die again. Oops, my bad. You roll that one, the big 21 right there. You roll that one again. And it has to be whatever your AC is or higher. Right, so let's say an enemy has 13 AC. In order to hit him, you have to roll 13 or higher to hit him, right? Then once you hit him, you have to then roll your damage die to see how much damage you do, right? So, let's go ahead and make this proper sized. Perfect. Alright, so basically, based off your class, your armor that you can equip is based off your class, and then what armor you have determines your AC, and then that's what that is. Basically, how hard it is to hit you with a physical attack. You got your weapons, which is also determined by your class, and your spells if you are a spellcaster, so on and so forth. Anyway, here's what you need in order to determine all that great stuff. And I would suggest you can. I can make a tutorial video on how to fill out your character sheet later. But essentially, you have this sheet. You can print it off from a computer or something like that. But in order to get the information you need to fill it out, you're going to need one of these things, okay? And this thing right here is the player's handbook. It's literally everything you need to know to play the game. It's all the spells, it's all the classes, all the races, all the bonuses, and everything you need to know, essentially, in order to make a character. All the items, essentially. Not magical items, but like shop items and whatnot. Horses, stuff like that. Basically, everything you need in order to play the game as a player. And so when you're filling out a character sheet, you're going to need one of these. You can find one of these at Books A Million or a gaming store as well. Probably not Game Exchange, maybe, but probably not. You can sometimes find a player handbook at Walmart as well. My Walmart currently sells one, right? You're also going to need one of these, the Dungeon Master's Guide. Now, if you're a player, don't be afraid. You can read the Dungeon Master's Guide. It helps you to understand how the game is played, right? But the thing about it is, these books, they're pretty big and thick. They cost $50-something as of right now, as of recording in this video. They're like $50-something. Maybe when we move to 6th edition, like, they might go down. Who knows? Like, I know that there are 2nd edition books that are sold for like $20 each. But yeah, these right now are worth around $50 to $60. The price is actually on the back of the book, but it's actually worth it though. Think about it like this, okay? You're paying $50, $50 to $100 for an infinite amount of video games, essentially, because each one is a different game, a different story, and a different character, right? And with these books, you're actually able to play as many games as you want, because that's all you need. It's just the 2 books. I mean, you'll need the monster manual if you want to be a DM, but not a player. To be the player, all you'll need is just the 2 books, right? You can even get most of the information you need as far as monsters and whatnot online, but I would suggest buying the books. But anyway, so you got your books, you got your dice, and I'm gonna go ahead and explain how the game's played. Okay, now this stuff right here you don't actually need in order to play the game, right? But how the game is played is, like I said, it's a game made in your imagination, okay? You got the DM and you got the player. And essentially, everything you do is determined by your player sheet, the one I showed you right here. Everything about your character is determined right here. And so the DM then sets you into a world. Right? He'll say you arrive at this town or something like that, right? Or you enter a forest, and from there you make decisions on what you want to do as a player. Okay, that's normally how I start off the game. I'll say, okay, everyone, you arrive at a town, and then from there the players decide what they want to do. They'll normally have beforehand motives and things that they want to do. I'll give them adventure hooks. I'll give them things that basically make them want to go on to the adventure. But yeah, I'll say, okay, so you arrive in the town. You as the player, what you're supposed to do is then determine what you want to do as a player. Okay, well, my character is hungry. I want to go to a pub, get something to eat and drink. Or I need to get some work. So where do I go to get some work? Also the pub. Or you can ask around town, hey, are there any problems around town that could use an adventurer? You know? Um, or maybe your character is tired. They just arrived in town from traveling several days. Well, they want to go to the inn. You know, maybe I want some items. You know, I have about 5 gold. Maybe I can get some cheap stuff. You know? And so, um, you know, you start there. And you start playing with your character. You start getting something to eat, talking to people, learning about the things that are happening nearby, and eventually this leads into the story. You know, right now, you know, in this picture right here, the party, we arrived in a forest because we're chasing after a hag, and she was giving us trouble. And we're like sailing on the seas, so we arrive on the island into this forest to go chase her down. And what happened here is we see a bunch of fae, which are, I guess you could say, forest creatures, sort of. And they're fighting these dark spiders and creatures like that. And so we basically, with a group of people we brought with us, we decided to attack them and save who we could. We didn't save everyone, obviously, you know, because D&D, you know, death has consequences. If a character dies or a player dies, they're dead for good, right? Now you can bring back players with the right amount of gold and whatnot. You can talk to a cleric and have them brought back. But most of the time, when a character dies, they're dead, right? Um, but basic gist is we went into the forest and we fought them. Then we fought the hags. It was a big deal. Anyway, yeah, that's basically what happens when you're playing D&D. You find a problem. You then, as an adventurer, go out to solve the problem. Oh, I need money. Well, there's this ruins nearby. You might want to go check out that. Here, there's buried treasure there, but it's full of traps. You know, so be careful. You know, that's when you bring the rogue with you to check for traps. But anyway, you know, you know, D&D, you know, and like this board right here isn't necessary to play D&D, although it does help. You know, each character can only move so many feet per turn. It gets a little hard to take track of where everyone is if you don't have a board maps drawn out, which, you know, they provide maps and whatnot too in D&D. You can buy that stuff at stores, you know, but you don't have to. You can literally just, you know, use your imagination. But yeah, so anyway, you know, you got a bunch of people sitting at a table. You know, you have 3 or 4 people playing, and then you got the DM with his DM screen. That thing right there, at the left side of the picture, is a DM screen. You know, they keep their stuff hidden so the players don't see and know what's about to happen. But you know, this is essentially what it looks like when you're playing D&D. You just got a bunch of people around a table rolling dice, you know, talking about what they're going to do, what they are doing, and so on and so forth. And it's, I feel like it's a really fun and unique way. I wouldn't recommend this game to anybody who has ADHD. You know, it's because this game requires you to, you know, concentrate on what's happening. You know, and most of the time people with ADHD, unfortunately, you know, they're not really able to stay focused on what's happening in the game, and then they're like, what just happened, or something like that, and whole plot points will fly by them. They won't really realize it, and it's, you know, it's not their fault, you know. But I mean, not to say that people with ADHD can't play D&D. I'm just saying it's harder for them. You know, I have a friend. I asked him if he wanted to play, and he said no. I couldn't possibly play it. You know, and it's not his fault or anything. It's just how it is. But you know, D&D D&D is a fun game. It's a great game. So I'm gonna go ahead. If you choose to play D&D, which of course I'll probably put out some videos explaining things about D&D. What are the classes? You know, what are the races? How to make a character. stuff like that. I'll probably put out videos on that in the future. But for now, if you are interested in playing D&D, whoever you know who might be like, hey, I'm a DM or something like that, would you like to play D&D? And then you go and play. If you don't know anyone at all who plays D&D and you still want to play D&D, I'll teach you that in the future too. But for now, if you wish to play D&D as a player, there's a couple of things I would suggest. I would suggest as a new player that you play a fighter type character, nothing too fancy. And I'm not saying don't play a wizard, don't play a cleric or anything like that. I'm just saying fighters are easier for new players. Normally with new players, and if you're playing a wizard or a cleric or whatever that has a bunch of spells and abilities, the problem with those characters is that it's so many things to keep track of, how many times you can cast a day, what spells you have, what the range on those spells is. Will it not hurt my allies? What dice do I roll for them? What are the checks? Is it a check? There's a lot of things for spells that are just a little overwhelming for a newer player. And it's kind of one of those things you want to gradually ease into. But I would suggest playing a fighter, a cleric, a ranger, a rogue, any class that doesn't have too many abilities to handle, because like the basic gist with a fighter is you have one objective in battle: run up to them and hit them with your sword. It's a pretty easy concept. Just run up and hit them with your sword, or hide behind a rock and shoot them with an arrow. I hide behind the rock, and then on my turn I shoot, and then I hide back behind the rock. It's a pretty simple concept. It's not too much complication with that. And, just enough to kind of sink your teeth into how the game is played and understand how the game is played. Another thing I would suggest doing as a player, and it's kind of counterintuitive to what I said a second ago, but it's still equally true. I suggest as a newer player, just kind of think outside the box. A lot of DMs, they will help you in how to play the game, but they will not help you in how to get through a dungeon or solve a problem. And most of the time, like in real life, there's multiple ways to solve a problem, and it just requires a little bit of outside the box thinking. Like for instance, if you see somebody who's invisible, maybe throw water around the room or something like that, and that'll reveal their location. Or flour or something like that. Maybe instead of fighting, try avoiding fighting, because the DM's not going to tell you that the big 40-foot tall giant is going to instantly kill you if you choose to fight it. But most of the time, new players, they want to attack everything they see because they think they're invincible, or they don't know that you're not supposed to fight everything you see. You can fight. Fighting is fine in D&D, but it's one of those things that you don't want to do unless you have to, or it will help further your goals. So it's kind of, pick and choose your fights, Be careful. Don't fight everything you see. If you see somebody talking bad to you, like, hey, what are you doing in my bar? Or, they're talking smack to you, don't fight them because you want to prove your dominance or something like that. That'll get you killed, Or don't be a coward either. You want to be smooth, but you also don't want to be stupid. It's a very tricky thing playing D&D, and you don't want to get your character killed. Essentially, you want to fight and have fun and adventure, but you also don't want to do something stupid. For instance, you sneak into a cave and you find that it has a whole bunch of orcs just walking around, but they don't see you yet. You hide. You don't run into the middle of the room and say, hey, I'm going to kill every last one of you, It never works out, you know. And sometimes you do have DMs that they want you to fight, so they'll try to lure you into situations where it's bad for your character, and that's fine. You just always plan for the worst, hope for the best kind of thing, and because like fighting's sometimes inevitable and you have to fight no matter what, but try to put yourself in the most advantageous position you can be in. Never put yourself in a bad situation, essentially, because like that's my DM style, and I'm not saying I'm a good DM. I'm I'm okay at best, but how I like to do things is I don't hold people's hands. I let them put themselves in bad situations. Essentially, like I'll give them a situation, and then they'll put themselves in it. That doesn't happen all the time. Sometimes it's just bad luck, really. But try to have fun, play the game, stuff like that. Anyway, so tip number one, play a simple character, an easy to play character. Tip number two, try to think outside the box. Tip number three, this one's very important. Okay, this is something I learned day one playing D&D. Okay, D&D is not it's not a typical video game. Okay, in video games, you're presented with everything you need to play the game. Everything is there for you. It's just a game, right? Whereas in D&D, it's played in your imagination. It has way more options, way more tactics and uses, right? Like, for instance, you're thinking, okay, well, I'm an adventurer. I have a sword and shield and stuff like that. You may not even get any of that to start off with. So it's like, well, how do I defend myself? Well, you have fists. You have feet. You can run. You can hide. You see somebody who looks shady, probably don't talk to them. Or like somebody's running at me. I don't have a weapon, and I really don't want to attack them with my fist. Pick up a rock, throw it at them. Look for a pan. Look for a chair. What would you do in real life if you find yourself in a room and somebody's holding a knife at you? What would you do unarmed with no sword or shield? Try to think along those lines. What would you do in those kind of situations? Another thing that's very important. Just because you're a rogue does not mean theft is okay. I know it sounds kind of weird, but like stealing in the world of D&D is a very tricky thing as well. If you're the kind of guy who wants to just walk into a store and see what they can steal, that's not what you need to do, okay? Because there are consequences for every action. And if you go and steal from a store, chances are you're going to get caught. Chances are the police are going to get involved. Chances are you're going to be thrown in jail. Now you're stuck in jail while everybody else is adventuring, So, it's not about stealing necessarily. It's about looking for the opportunity to steal. Okay. For instance, I found myself. I'm playing with my character. His name is Artex the Bard. He's a goblin. Okay, and he is exactly what you expect a goblin to be. And I find myself in this underground dwarven town. They're called Duragar, which are kind of like dark, warped dwarfs. Dark, warped dwarfs. And their thing is they can turn invisible. But anyway, so all of a sudden, a giant bursts through the wall of the town. And they just start flooding in, and the party runs to go attack. We're in the middle of the city, in the bazaar, where the shops and stuff are, and the wall just gets broke down because we're underground. Cave walls everywhere. And these giants start flooding into the city, and the party's fighting them, and what do? I hide behind the stalls, pretending like I'm hiding from the giants, when in actuality, I'm looking around to see if anybody's looking at me. And of course, I have see invisibility, so I can see if someone's invisible, right? I'm just looking around. If I don't see anyone looking in my direction, I reach up on the stall and grab the money and grab the weapons or items or whatever, and I don't show it until I leave the city. Because a shopkeeper will most likely brand their items or whatnot, and they'll be like, "Oh, that's my sword. I had one go missing just yesterday." "Oh, really? I didn't see one on you yesterday." "Ah, you're the thief. Time to go to jail." Stuff like that. But just if you steal something, make sure it's something that's not noticeable, that cannot be found on your persons until you leave the area. And make sure it's when nobody could possibly be looking at you. Look for opportunities, Oh, this person got knocked out from a sleep spell, but you don't. So it's like, okay, well, I steal his stuff, you know. I steal his stuff and I go back to what I was doing, you know. It's like, oh, I didn't put you to sleep. That guy put you to sleep, so maybe he stole your stuff, you know. You know, you should look for opportunities. Essentially, if you're gonna do things. Anyway, so this is basically how D&D is played. And oh yeah, hold on. There we go. If you see anything like this, run. But because I know this is a mind-blowing concept, but dragons in the world of Dungeons and Dragons are a scary thing. And if you ever see a dragon, they are most likely a very scary and dangerous thing and will kill your party. It's not. There's a lot of things in the world of D&D that will kill your party. I don't care what level you are. But anyway, this is basically what Dungeons and Dragons is, and I figured I'd talk about it and tell y'all what Dungeons and Dragons is. And if you like it, that'd be great. Y'all should totally play it. It's a great game. There are other games like Dungeons and Dragons that you can check out as well. Pathfinder, Starfinder, heck, Warhammer is kind of like Dungeons and Dragons, but less story based. There are lots of games like this, tabletop games that you can totally check out. This is just one that I prefer. And of course, if you have any questions, definitely put them in the comments. I'll answer them as best as I can. I'll try to put out videos on how to make characters, how to play, like how to do this or that in D&D. What is an item? A good source that you could go to for descriptions of classes and whatnot. There's a guy, I forget what his name is, but he puts out videos on YouTube called A Crap Guide to D&D. You should totally check them out. They're like a minute or two. They're just amazing. Anyway, if you like this video, please hit the like button, and of course subscribe to the Nerd Steel channel. I would like to put out more videos like this, more explanation-like videos. So, if you like that, just let me know in the comments. Anyway, I hope y'all enjoyed this video. I'll see you later.